Yo, what's up, y'all? It's JD and James back with another live stream. And today, as you guys can see in the title, we're going to be talking about why most people can't identify true value. And I'd probably just go over what I mean by this statement, why most people can't identify true value. And basically, it is most people kind of fall for, the shiny object. Most people kind of have that shiny object syndrome when it comes down to, who they trust, maybe whether it's in like fitness, whether it's in finances. Pretty much the same rule applies in all areas of life, but especially when it comes down to social media, because there's so many people out there trying to deceive you, and there's so many people out there basically trying to sell you some snake oil. And probably the biggest example of this is probably through finances, because it's something that a lot of people need, and a lot of people are desperate for finances. And once you get into a desperate mindset for anything in life, you're probably going to take the first thing that comes at you. And I just remember growing up in the Bay Area, and I remember just so many people that I grew up with will be falling for these pyramid schemes and what they call now multi-level marketing. And you know, I never went for any of it, and I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back, just more so because like my dad like taught me about pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes probably when I was 12 years old. But for the most people who are in that same desperate area where people, most of the people who I grew up with didn't really have much. And when it comes down to having an opportunity and somebody tells you, "Oh yeah," like especially the fact that most of the time when these people are introducing you to some quote unquote business or quote unquote opportunity, they're usually dressed really nice. They usually have a suit on. They're showing you what type of cars they drive. They usually tell you that, they just got back from this vacation in the Bahamas, and, their wife is doing this, and, they made so much money, and, they got all this passive income coming in their sleep. And the same thing is going on nowadays on the internet. This used to be, back in the days, people used to come into Starbucks or they used to come into the gym, and this is where they used to run that con back then. But nowadays, it's gotten more sophisticated. It's on social media networks. It's on YouTube. It's on Instagram. It's on probably on TikTok too. And it doesn't necessarily just come in the form of a Ponzi scheme like a multi-level marketing. It can come in a form of anything. And one way that I think about it in fitness before I hand it over to James is like a lot of times you might be scrolling through TikTok or you might be scrolling through Instagram. And instead of following the people who actually have a sound workout regimen or somebody who has like a sound routine, it's like everybody wants to click on the dude who's doing muscle ups with a bench attached to his waist. Or everybody wants to, follow the ab routine of the guy who's, flipping a 10-pound plate on his feet with a workout partner doing the exact same routine while they're oiled up with a bunch of coconut oil and spray tanned out. So these are the type of things that it's and granted, when you're a beginner or a novice in a certain area, it's kind of easier to fall for kind of the banana and the pipe tail, or fall for these little tricks that people are paying because to the naked eye it looks like, hey, this dude's successful, this dude has a six-pack, this dude has a bunch of money. He said he just went on a vacation. On his YouTube video, he's showing himself in the Bahamas, so he's got to know what he's talking about. So I don't know, James, I don't know, I'm gonna hand it off to you, but it's definitely prevalent nowadays.
Man, it's so common. And I think it's so funny because you actually reminded me of this story. I hadn't even thought about this in so long, but I remember back when I was 19 or 20 years old, I remember my ex-girlfriend at the time got invited to this like presentation at a car. I think it was like the Mercedes-Benz dealership. These like multi-level marketing people. Um, they like set up this whole presentation. I think it was like Body by Visalis or some BS like that. I'm not even gonna mind throwing names out there because you're a scammer, you're a scammer. Deal with it. Um, but it was so funny because I remember back then it was like they were putting these numbers on the screen, and I guess maybe this is a foreshadow because I'm a numbers guy. Now I remember I got like this little scratch piece of paper and a pencil and I drew out and I said for their numbers to pan out, I said the population would have to be 11 billion people at 8 levels deep, or you run out of enough people for this thing to keep working. And I mentioned it to the guy that was presenting, and I guess they got a little bit offended. I remember my ex-girlfriend was like, "Oh, you're embarrassing me," but my thing is numbers never really lie, right? So I've always been a numbers person. I think that's kind of why I've tend to not really fall for the shiny object, because I want to see what's under the hood. And even when it comes to like flashy fitness stuff, I'm always just a numbers person. It's like if you're doing a muscle up with a bench on it, I want to see how much does the bench weigh, what's the weight, composition. I mean, I think it's funny though, because I think as humans we really do kind of crave that supernatural, you know what I mean? That's something that can't be measured. It's superhuman. And I think that a lot of times is why people get drawn into superhuman strength,
Yeah.
um, all these little gimmicks.
But another thing I was just thinking about too is like, when it comes down to this, at the end of the day, the reason why we're making this video isn't to like chastise or criticize people for falling for these, Ponzi schemes, or for, those shiny objects that people are kind of always flashing and flaunting. It's more so to kind of do a little bit more research, like James says. If it's a number situation, figure out what the actual numbers are behind, this business plan, or see what's under the hood when it comes down to this fitness routine that these people are trying to sell you. And when you're seeing and you're so impressed by something, give it a try yourself, maybe, and you might be able to do it. A lot of these things that look extremely difficult aren't even really that difficult. But I was thinking about something else in terms of how you can, a simple way that you can actually do a background check on people is actually just a quick Google search. A lot of times these people are actual criminals. I remember one time, it was back in the day, one of my best friends, his sister was trying to get him to go to some like real estate conference. It was basically like, it was a real estate conference, but it just sounded so fishy to me when I first heard the concept behind it. It was like, you give this guy in money to invest in some real estate project, and then he gives you a percentage back of the earnings. And I remember the guy's name was like Dean Graziano or something like that. And like, I immediately, as soon as I heard it, and my friend was saying he was going to the conference, I like Googled this dude, Dean Graziano. Of course, nothing but negative reviews come up. Like the first two paid ads were like positive, but then if you actually looked at all the real reviews on this dude, it's like, he's a scam artist. I lost money. He didn't come through with this, that, and the other. And I see a lot of the same things going on YouTube. And actually, I want to get to a couple of comments right now. And hey, high value is dependent on the individual that's assessing them. There are universal high value traits, but tying it to monetary value is sad. 100%. Like, that's honestly another point that me and James kind of, talk about in our private conversations, is that money is actually a almost, I wouldn't say a terrible way to assess value, because in some instances money does, show a little bit of value. But to an individual, I don't think that money is necessarily something. It could tell if somebody might be a good, business person, or, in the grand scheme of things in this society, money, honestly, the amount of money that you can make almost is an indicator for how good of a swindler you are, because the whole U.S. economy, or just the whole world economy in a way, is kind of a pyramid scheme, to be honest with you. And we could all decide that fiat money is worthless tomorrow, and then what defines high value to associating to being a monetary quality exclusively. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. And another thing about that is, one thing James had mentioned to me in a private conversation is that, and James, you might want to expand on this, is that what value do you actually add? How can you actually help somebody? What problems do you solve? That's actually an indicator of what type of value that you have, opposed to just how much money you have in your bank account. Because you can have $20 billion in your bank account, but you don't know how to fish, you don't know how to cook, you don't know how to hunt, you don't know how to do any type of things that are actually practical, except for manipulate people and manipulate money. That's not real value. And I think that people have been sold this superficial and materialistic dream, and they associate the money, the superficial cars, the Instagram. How many followers do they have? That'll show if they're actually legit or not. How much money do they have? That'll show if they're legit or not. What type of car do they drive? What type of house do they live in? That's more so the way that people tend to assess value nowadays. And I hear the term high value this, high value that a lot nowadays. And one thing that me and James kind of preach is not high value, but high performance. So there's a difference between high performance and high value. High value is something where it can be appraised, subjectively. High performance is an objective measure. How fast you run a 100-yard dash is not subjective. That doesn't have it. There's no opinions to that. How much weight you can lift, there's no opinions to that. That's straight facts. But James, you might want to take it from there.
I mean, this topic could be absolutely never ending. And it's like, this is honestly one of probably my biggest rants about, maybe you could just say, culture or, current society. And like, because looking back at myself, like, this is honestly the biggest change I've made in, like, who I actually look up to and who I actually, admire and who I consider to be, high quality people that are worthy of, like, studying or, drawing lessons from. And I think, like, we live in a sales culture nowadays. As sad as that is to say, it's like, I feel like we live in a culture where a lot of, quote unquote, high value or rich people are really just people that are good at sales, and I'm not even bashing sales, because I mean, I know it is a necessary part of a business, right? Conveying the value of a certain product. But it's like, now you get to the point where it's like sales on top of sales on top of sales. It's like a salesperson selling other salespeople on how to sell other people. And then it's like, even in terms of, like, in the fitness arena, it's like, now they've gotten into, like, trainers trying to sell other trainers on how to sell training to more. And it's just like a pyramid scheme of, like, sales. And it's like, in terms of, like, actual value to society, like actually contributing, goods and services getting circulated into the economy that's actually going to benefit people's lives. Do you think a good amount of, human resources and energy should be spent on how to convince people to purchase something? Or do you think it should be actually spent, doing experiments, like what actually is going to help with weight loss, like actually, like, learning and, finding that cutting edge, next information that's going to help people better their life? Or is it better to just study, what are the weak points in their psyche, so I can oversell them and make them overpay for training that I know they're not going to show up to, but I can keep the money anyway? Or, different. I mean, it's never ending. And I think, I've just seen countless people that we all kind of look up to and, take for granted as being these, great business people. But then when you actually really look at it, a lot of the people at the top of the top in the business realm are really just, glorified salespeople who are great at, selling a vision and selling kind of an illusion of something that truly doesn't even exist. It's all really a fraud at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, I'll actually even give a kind of a practical story. And, one of the people I actually used to really look up to was Mark Cuban. I remember I watched him on Shark Tank. I'm like, this guy's a brilliant business person. It's like he made his ball in tech, But when you actually study this story and you look into it, the reason why he actually made his first ball of wealth was selling this streaming service website to Yahoo. And he basically was brilliant at sales. He made Yahoo overpay for the streaming service because Yahoo wanted to beat Google. And if they beat Google, then they were going to get overvalued by the market. And, then he ended up, taking out a collar with options to protect the stock that Yahoo awarded him. But it was kind of funny because I just had this realization that, the product ended up tanking, didn't make Yahoo any money. It was a complete flop, worthless service to everyone in society. But then it's like, we're over here like, oh, this person, billionaire, contributing value, as capitalists, we need, business people are innovating and, creating so much value. But a lot of times when you trace different people as well, certain people create amazing value to our society. Like, people create products that everyone benefits from. But then there's certain people, when you kind of trace their wealth back, you realize it's like a series of like swindle this person to swindle this person to swindle another person. And I don't think we should be idolizing those people. I mean, even if, they might have earned their money legally, and there's nothing wrong with it, whatever, they can do them. They're on their journey. But I think as a society, we shouldn't be idolizing people who have made a vast amount of wealth but truly didn't give a contribution. Their contribution was really swindling people who might not have been as smart as them. They might have been a little bit smarter than people, and they figured out how to manipulate them. But I don't think that's really something that should be looked up to.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And Art says Ty Lopez is exactly what you're describing. Haha. Sadly, this model will always work. There's a fool born every day. I think there's a fool. There's more than one fool born every day. But that's funny because me and James were actually talking about this before we even got on a live stream, and I was talking about the originator of the term Ponzi is a guy named Charles Ponzi, and the same scam, the same cons that he was running back in 100 years ago are still working today. And James made a funny comment that history always repeats itself. And there you go, right there. Ty Lopez is, maybe like last generation's Charles Ponzi of YouTube, but there's plenty. There's Ty Lopez was last generation's, but there's like 100 more people to replace him, if not 1,000 more people to replace him. And Art, greetings to you both. Thanks for taking time to share your thoughts for us. Appreciate you stopping through. Definitely appreciate you stopping through. And Art also says that's what high value is to me. Tracy Thompson, what's going on, Tracy? Hey, how y'all doing? Definitely doing good today. Uh, Good to be back on live streams with you guys. And Erwin Forbes, honestly, I come from poverty, so many is extremely important since I lack family support, etc. So many, I'm not exactly sure what you're saying there. The best thing is to have an actual career, a trade, an education certificate that can actually help you. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And when it comes to money, I just read personal finance books that speak of budgeting, Roth IRA, having emergency funds. If you have 6 months of expenses saved, you will be less desperate. Yeah, definitely. That's actually a good point right there. And okay, he said he meant money, but that's actually a good point right there. Is that desperation is what actually causes a lot of these problems in general. Is like trying to do things too fast, and the same kind of thing goes for in like the fitness world as well. Like if you're trying to lose weight too fast, you're probably going to end up doing it the wrong way. If you're trying to press the limit on getting to a certain fitness goal too fast, you're probably going to end up injuring yourself. So, getting into that mindset of, going the slow and easy route, or not necessarily a slow and easy route, but the slow route usually ends up being faster in the long run anyway, because there's always going to be more setbacks involved with trying to rush things. And Simply Deep 1985, what's up, Growth Through Calisthenics, and James, and the chat, what's going on? And let's see here. And yeah, so I'll take a second to pause real quick before we kind of move on, and briefly mention the mastermind group that me and James are starting up, and give you guys some details on it. I'm going to put it in the chat my email address if you guys are interested in joining that mastermind group. So far, we've been getting inquiries, pretty a good amount of inquiries. So if you guys are interested, we still got maybe about a week or two before we actually get this thing rolling. And just hit my email address, which is travelsthenics@yahoo.com. And I'll put that in the chat real quick. Yeah, one other way I kind of wanted to talk about this as well, as far as people's perception of value, will kind of be in dating as well. And, I think all of these things are all connected. And I definitely think that, when it comes down to people's perception on what's a high value woman or what's a desirable woman to be with, sometimes me and James joke about this, but I mean, it's something that's actually a real phenomenon. And that is that, people kind of base value when it comes down to dating, or at least I think a lot of men base value when it comes down to dating based on one thing, and that's looks. And it's usually like a certain type of look. And when it comes down to like maybe Instagram girls who are quote unquote Instagram models, but outside of their look, they actually don't really have any value at all. And and I'm not saying all Instagram models are like this, but I would say the majority of them probably are. When it comes down to their actual, what they actually provide as an actual human being, or their skill set or anything of that nature. Me and James like to make the joke, people are putting all this they're putting all this weight into Starbucks barista. She's basically like a Starbucks barista or a bottle service girl, but because she's on Instagram showing everybody her body and everything like that, people are overvaluing this woman. And then there's actually a ton of you know high performing women, a ton of quality women that people are just overlooking because they're not exposing themselves and putting themselves on Instagram. And for me, when it comes down to like that whole complaining about modern women thing, all modern women aren't the same. So, when it comes down to complaining about gold diggers and stuff like that, it's like, yeah, I mean, when you're moving in that desperate energy and you're thirsting over these women on the internet, yeah, that's the only thing that you see. But if you actually step outside of the house, you'll see something different. And Tracy said, "Do you got a PayPal?" Yeah, I do got a PayPal. Tracy, I'm gonna send you my PayPal information when when we finish this live stream. So when it comes down to the mastermind group, guys, for the next week, we'll probably keep it at $25 a month to join the mastermind group. And like I said, it's gonna be in the previous chats, at least in the previous videos. Basically, what the mastermind group is going to be us meeting maybe twice a month, probably about twice a month, more than likely. We're going to have different topics that we're going to discuss, similar to what we're doing here, except we're going to have more people involved and we're going to go deeper into those topics to where, maybe me and James can kind of go a little bit deeper where we feel a little bit more comfortable in a private chat. And also, it's going to be basically for you guys and us to network with you guys as well and just improve. It's a growth mastermind group. So we'll be assigning readings. There'll be mandatory fitness challenges. And, these are things that we want to keep up and get everybody involved in this so we can all better each other. And, if somebody provides a service in the group that other people need, then there you go right there. There goes your connect right there. And you can provide this person, there goes a client, and there goes somebody who can help you with a service. All right, let's see here. Once again, thanks for answering my goofy question the other day. My example sounded unrealistic, but just making conversation. It's no problem, man. I actually, what the funny thing is, Simply Deep, is that I actually thought about your question a little bit deeper the other day, or I was actually thinking about it this morning. And I actually thought about it, and I think my answer was a little bit too simplistic, to be honest with you, because when it comes down to embarrassment, it's not necessarily that easy to just think that, oh, this is just something that we have to learn to deal with, and this is something that we have to get over. Because, embarrassment can be a real thing. And, I don't necessarily feel like I have the answers for how to deal with it, but it's definitely something that I've experienced in my life. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to deal with embarrassment at some point. It just comes with the territory as being a human being. But trying to keep everything in perspective and zoom out and realize that this is just one small aspect of your life, I think is probably the best way to deal with it. And Erwin Forbes, the truth is men don't have to date. We don't have to approach women for sex. Must men date because of lust? Many men would benefit from a period of celibacy. Get over that lustful mindset. That actually is something that's a kind of something that me and James and the chat has actually talked about on these live streams before. Is kind of like that whole concept of semen retention and monk mode and different things of that nature. And personally, I actually don't think that there's anything wrong with doing it for a certain period of time. I just don't necessarily think that people should do it as a lifestyle. I think if you can get yourself to the point where you're happy or you can live a content life by yourself, then everything else is gravy. And then you're going to view everything else as gravy. And you're not going to be desperate to have a companion. You're not going to be desperate to have friends or a woman or anybody in your life. So everybody that you involve in your life is going to be actually quality people and going to be an asset to you, opposed to just being somebody there to fill some emotional gap. The issue with many men with women is that women are out of control. Women have moods that we cannot predict. And as James said, women now are our competitors and should not be underestimated. I mean, I definitely think that as far as in the workforce, they might be our competitors. But I do think on kind of an interpersonal level, at least the way I look at relationships and the way I look at even friendships in general, I think that people are tending people are should actually balance each other out. Like even as friends, if you have like a friend who's very strong in one area, you might be strong in a different area. And as a friend or as business partners or whatever it may be, you guys come together and you guys create one stronger force. And that's kind of the same way I view relationships as well. It's like you might have somebody who's maybe, for instance, this is probably a good example of my personal life is that a lot of times when I end up getting these relationships, the girls who I get into relationships with tend to be a little bit more meticulous than I am, as far as like being a planner, writing things out, planning things out. And I'm more of like a laid back, kind of go with the flow type of person. And, I think it kind of balances each other out in a lot of ways because maybe I can be too laid back a lot of times. And I need somebody there to kind of keep me in check in terms of planning things. And a lot of times people who are like planners and kind of too detail oriented can be a little bit too high strung, and they might need somebody to just tell them, hey, chill, like we don't need to plan everything out like that. So I don't necessarily view it all as competition. I think that people can be there to balance each other out and you know combine forces, so to speak, and create kind of a team.
Yeah, I'm guessing he was just referring to like the competitor thing was just in the workforce because that was
Yeah,
kind of the context of like how I brought that up. Definitely not in terms of dating. That's you're not if you view him as a competitor, that's like definitely the wrong mindset. But um, I think the other thing too, I don't necessarily think because I think the one guy mentioned like that period of celibacy. I don't even think there's necessarily anything that wrong with a bit of lust, but I think you also have to have discipline and you also have to have a set of values that you won't break under any circumstances. And I think a lot of the times the reason why people have so many frustrations is because they're breaking their own rules that they set. And it's like if you have your own value system and you're breaking your value system for other people and getting walked over, you're going to be frustrated with yourself. You're going to feel like shit because it's like, you know, it's one thing not following other people's rules, but it's like if you set rules that you believe in and like you set them for a reason and you want to live by a set of values and you break your own belief system. I mean, to me, that's an extremely talk about something that would absolutely, tomahawk your self confidence is breaking your own value system. And I truly think that's another element that a lot of people are missing is like they don't have a strong set of beliefs that they came up with on their own and that they truly believe in. And I think that's where a lot of like, self belief stems from is like having a strong set of core beliefs and sticking to that under all circumstances. And it's like when you keep following that, it's like it really does kind of build up momentum.
yeah, no, definitely. I actually kind of want to touch on, since a lot of the comments in the comment section right now are, addressing like these intergender dynamics as far as dealing with women and stuff. I kind of want to actually touch on something as far as pivoting back to the actual topic, as far as why most people can't identify true value. And, I forget exactly what our live stream. I think we were talking about like dating coaches and like people who are trying to basically sell you on all these alpha male strategies, and people telling you how to bag women and all this other type of stuff. But I think it kind of basically goes back to the same root problem, is that people want the quick fix. And when it comes down to somebody like alpha male strategies, and granted, I mean, the dude's doing well for himself, so I really can't hate on him as far as like him creating a platform for himself or whatever. And same thing with the fresh and fit guys or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like they're trying to give you these little hacks to where you can like, oh, you can get women like this. All you have to do is just, do use Photoshop on Tinder and, make sure that you make your Instagram look like you're living this extravagant lifestyle. It's like all these little tricks to basically create an illusion opposed to actually doing the real work and creating actual value in yourself. Because when you create actual value in yourself, you're going to attract people to you and you're going to attract high value people to yourself. But when you create an illusion, like pretend that you got more money than you have, or pretend that you actually are more attractive than you are, then you start delving into like the whole superficial and fake world. Then you're going to start attracting the wrong energy to yourself. And then, when things go south, you really don't have anybody else to blame for it but yourself because you tried to take the shortcut route. Like, and I remember I still do have a friend. I have a friend. One of my friends is like all into this thing. I don't even know if this is the exact right term for it, but it's like biohacking, and it's basically trying to find all these little tricks like all these little tricks to get healthy. And it's like, oh, you should do this, and you only need to work out 4 minutes a day. You just do Tabata workouts, and like, oh yeah, you should eat this because this is gonna trick your body into think that you're intermittent fasting. And it's like I don't want to trick my body into anything, and I don't need to take a shortcut to do any of these things. It's like I'd rather just go the 7 days per week route, grease in the groove, do a real intermittent fast, try to eat the 80-20 balance clean as possible, and just do it like that. Like that's a proven formula that's been working forever. And when it comes down to all these biohacking things, it's like trying to, you know, reinvent the wheel. And when it comes down to actual value and things that actually work in life, like these things aren't. It's just like those little ab machines you put on your stomach that are supposed to give you a six pack without doing anything. You watch TV and eat popcorn. But Art says, I don't mind a challenge women supposedly bring. I've never had any ongoing problems with women I'm dealing with. Yeah, man, I definitely agree with that. And to be honest with you, like one thing I've kind of realized is that if a woman doesn't give you any type of challenge, it's not really sharpening your tools up. Like it's almost boring to a certain extent. But and I don't mean like giving you a headache. I just mean kind of giving you a little bit of keeping you on your toes. And I feel to a slight degree that it's the rite of passage being able to handle feminine energy. I learned that I function well around female energy. The girl I'm seeing is becoming an asset more and more. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Like when it comes down to life in general, like we're not gonna understand any aspect of our life right away. Like you can't just jump into fitness and think that you're just going to get right on the right path in fitness. You might get lucky and end up having the right coach or the right teacher that's able to kind of teach you things, but it's inevitable that you're going to have some type of stumbling block. Same thing when it comes to finances, same thing when it comes to like learning a skill set, all these different things. So just because you're having maybe a couple problems, or you're learning things on the fly when it comes down to dealing with women, doesn't mean that it's the women's fault. Sometimes we need to kind of do a better job of learning ourselves, or just kind of assessing the environment that we're in. And let's see here, do you think you have to have your shit together to attract women, or are there quality women out there who will be attracted to a guy even if he doesn't have a job, doesn't have a car, etc.? I mean, it just depends. I mean, I don't necessarily think that. I think we should be trying to work on ourselves no matter what. And this is the thing. Like, I really think that like we don't necessarily have to be a finished product. But I think what a lot of women who actually can assess real value can see is that if they can see potential, I think women have actually a better, maybe quality women have a better idea of what true potential is anyway. So if they see you working hard, they see you on your grind at the gym, they see you, at the coffee shop on the computer all day studying or working on something, or a lot of people notice these things. You might be so locked in that you don't even notice because you're kind of locked in. You got your head down, and other people are seeing this, and other people can kind of see that value, and they can see your work ethic. And you don't necessarily have to drive the nice car, or have the money or whatever it is at that point, and you can still attract the right people to you. I've had that happen to me plenty of times in the past.
Man, what do you think about the concept though of female attraction actually knocking you off course and being the worst thing that could actually happen for you?
As far as like
Because I think it's
being,
funny because he mentions the comment like you don't have a car, like your life is in shambles, and like still attracting women, and I'm like, the absolute worst thing that can happen is like getting too much female attention when it's like you're on the verge of being homeless, and it's like it's like a sign that you're doing things right. It's like at that point it's like I think the worst thing that could possibly happen for you is to get like a bunch of women still giving you attention. It's like I feel like another kind of beautiful thing about if you think about masculine and feminine energy, I think women are also there as a mechanism to like kind of show you when you're falling off course, and like to give you a very negative reaction if you are not on a proper course. And I mean, it definitely is possible to attract women. You could be a complete deadbeat. I mean, there's the one dude I think he like just had his mug shot went viral just because the dude was so good looking. So it's like,
yeah, I remember that.
but I mean, is that the best for you at the end of the day? I mean,
Definitely
maybe,
not.
maybe not. But I think the better question I'd say is, would you rather have a woman and be a deadbeat yourself, or would you rather not have a woman and actually be living a fulfilled life and actually accomplishing the goals you set out for yourself?
Yeah, but I will say this: I don't think that these two things have to be completely separate. I think that there is different circumstances where, if you don't have your stuff together, but you have the right person that comes in your life, they can be an extremely beneficial asset. And I'll give you an example after I'm. I just want to let you guys just take a brief little break to tell you guys, if you guys are in the chat, go ahead and hit the like button. Take a little break, hit the like button if you guys haven't hit the like button. And also, if you guys are interested, join the Patreon. If you guys want to support my channel, it's only $5 a month to join the Patreon, in the link in the description box below. And as far as when it comes down to like a lot of these topics where I talk about like intergender dynamics and different things of that nature, a lot of my videos on Patreon are about that. I actually uploaded a video earlier, and I'm uploading 2 videos as we speak to my Patreon, and they touch on some of these topics. And you guys can also request topics on my Patreon. I'll make a video about it. So, like I said, go to patreon.com/growth through calisthenics. It's only $5 to join if you support the channel. And, it's basically essentially buying me a coffee every month. But but I'll get back to the topic at hand. But the example I was going to make was one of my good friends, who actually got out of prison and was getting his life back together. But he had a fortunate situation to where he was stayed with the same girl while he was locked up. When he got out of prison, he didn't have any money. He didn't have a car. He didn't really have a job. He didn't have anything. But he was able to kind of get back on his feet because he had a good woman in his life. And but what he did in return was, this is actually the ultimate way that you pay people back when they do you favors like this. You just work your ass off. He started off having a job at a grocery store. Then he got a second job at Office Depot. These are not high paying jobs, but he was just grinding, trying to stack as much money as possible, pay off bills that he needed to pay off. And then eventually he ended up landing a job at a bus company that paid pretty decent. And then his ultimate goal, at least for the short term, was to get an apprenticeship as a construction inspector. And he eventually ended up lining that up as far as lining up a job. And then he ended up spending a bunch of money on the reading materials he needed to pass a test. And these tests aren't necessarily easy tests to pass. Was studying every single day to pass these tests. And eventually, I don't even know if this even took a year. It probably took about a year for all this to manifest. He ended up passing the test, getting a job as a concrete inspector, and now he's making. This is probably what 2.5, 3 years later. He's making a really good living as a concrete inspector, and he has. Every single time I talk to him, he's taking another test. He's like, "Oh, I need to take a test to, get another raise. Oh, I got offered a position here. They want to give me a raise. They want to give me a promotion. That's how you pay people back. So if you are in a position where you can attract a woman, if she's the type of woman who can kind of assist you and is not necessarily, I feel like sometimes you can get in these situations where women are using you as kind of a play toy, as a distraction, or if it's the right situation, it's going to be like with my friend, and she's going to be there as an assistant, and not as assistant, but as an asset. But then you actually have to follow through and pay these people back with your success. And if they need help in the long run, then you pay it right back to them as well. And that's just kind of the way I view that is the best way to go about that. And yeah, biohacking is definitely another Ponzi scheme. Honestly, I think. Oh, the name of the dude who's the biohacking dude is some guy named Dave Asprey. So that was the thing where it's like you can. It's called like an intermittent fast mimic. You're mimicking an intermittent fast, and you're like doing things to disguise the food that you're actually eating.
Man, who comes up with these things, man? This is hilarious. Like,
And Ganjin88, what's going on? Glad to see you in the chat. I'm here once again. What's good, everyone? What's going on? And let's see here. Looks like you guys got some. Actually, I'm not even going to read into this because I don't really know. That's a conversation I think I missed out on. But yeah, guys. So if you guys have any questions regarding any of this stuff, leave the questions in the chat. But I think that as far as I'll probably dive into the fitness aspect of things as well. Just since this is a calisthenics, part of what I do on this channel is talk about calisthenics, and I think it's good not to get ahead of ourselves when it comes down to our journey. And even when you think, actually, I think this kind of goes for everything, even when it comes down to finances as well. You guys, I kind of think about things like this. Um, what would happen if you got $1 million today? And I have to ask myself that question. James can ask himself that question, and you guys can ask yourself that question in the chat. What exactly would you do with $1 million? What would you do with $20 million? Let's just say, for instance, something you did blew up. Let's just say, for instance, my YouTube channel blows up somehow, and you know, all of a sudden I've got people, offering me sponsorships, and all these things are coming in at once. Am I actually ready for it all at one time? Am I ready to receive $20 million in sponsorships? Am I ready to receive these type of things? What do I even know what to do with $20 million right now? Because it's such a drastic change from my current state. I'm actually primed for the taking when it comes down to people taking advantage of me and manipulating me. And the same thing, it's a different aspect when it comes down to fitness, because it's not really something that can actually even happen. It's not even realistic to the point where you can go from being an absolute out of shape beginner to being a super elite athlete in 6 months. And I think a lot of times people can see people in calisthenics channels, and they kind of get the wrong perception about how fast they can get to that goal. They overestimate how quick that they can improve. And there's nothing wrong with having high goals and high aspirations, but at the same time having it in your head that you just need to kind of take each day at a time. Don't try to skip ahead. I remember when I was playing basketball, and sometimes when I was in high school, particularly, um, sometimes I was a shooter, so I played shooting guard in high school, and 3-point shots and just shooting in general was just my thing. And sometimes I would maybe start the game off cold. I might go like 0 for 5 or something like that. And my coach would always tell me, you're trying to score 30 points with one shot. It's like you're pressing so hard that you're trying to get ahead of yourself, and you're worried about 30 points. You're worried about scoring a 30-point game, opposed to just worrying about that one shot that you're taking. And, you can actually take this in all aspects of life, especially when it comes down to calisthenics. It's like you're worried about being able to do a movement that's probably a year and a half away instead of worrying about doing a quality rep on that pull up or doing a quality rep on that handstand. So, these are things that kind of need to let's see, we need to take it into consideration when we're trying to rush the process on anything when it comes down to following these financial gurus and trying to get rich quick overnight. Let's see what Ganjan says about his $20 million. $20 million, quit the job, travel the world, buy real estate property, put money in a dividend stock, and do it all through a holding company. Uh, I mean, I don't know too much about. I mean, that doesn't sound like a bad plan. Travel the world, and I mean, I guess you can just live off of. Okay, let's see here. Actually, this is a dude right here. I actually do know who this guy is. So Mind Blown says, "Do you watch Infinite Waters Diving Deep?" I've seen some of that dude's content, but to be completely honest with you, there's like I don't necessarily think that a lot of the stuff that he's talking about is wrong. But at the end of the day, like I don't like self-proclaimed gurus. I don't like people who claim that they're like I really there's actually a term that I hear a lot of YouTube people talking about, and they call themselves chosen ones, as if God just chose them to be so enlightened. And to me, nobody on this earth actually knows much about anything in the grand scheme of things anyway. So how are we going to call ourselves a chosen one? How are we going to call ourselves enlightened, and how are we going to call ourselves a guru? So, that's kind of the one thing about that type of content that kind of turns me off. Some of the principles that he speaks on his channel, I do agree with, but at the same time, I think that, I don't really like self-aggrandizement too much. Like I don't like that kind of mindset of like constantly big up in yourself. It's like do your thing, be confident, don't put yourself down, but you don't need to let everybody else know how smart you are. You don't need to let everybody else know how spiritual you are, how great you are. Like there is people do need to have a little bit of humility. And let's see. This would be a good question for me and James to answer. What is the best way to start calisthenics? I saw both your Instagrams and was all inspired. I'm kind of heavy at the moment. Should I start with small reps? Dips are a struggle, especially pull-ups. Okay, so that's a good one. So number one, before I answer your question, if anybody's actually interested in one-on-one coaching, you guys can hit up my website and you guys can work with me one-on-one. I do online calisthenics coaching. Also, if you guys are interested, I have a beginners program on my website. I have an intermediate program, and I also can do custom workout programs as well. So if you guys are interested in any of those services, hit up my website. I actually have everything discounted right now. It's travelstinks.com. But just to answer your question simply, how I would my perspective on it, especially when it comes down to starting off calisthenics a little bit overweight, resistance bands are going to be your best friends. So what I would do right now, whenever you finish watching this chat, or maybe you want to open up a separate window while you're listening, go on Amazon.com and order some resistance bands, like the calisthenics kind of resistance bands. And if you're curious about what type of resistance bands I'm talking about, you can just email me and I'll send you a link to the Amazon resistance bands that I actually recommend, because they're going to help you as far as being able to go full range of motion with proper form on pull-ups and dips. And these are probably, I would say, pull-ups and dips are the best calisthenics exercises for the upper body. And James, what would you say as far as getting started in calisthenics from like a standpoint of somebody who's a bit overweight?
I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about how we actually marginalize the little details in like our day to day life, and like we don't take like um, for example, like say you're at 2 pull-ups, have respect for 3 pull-ups. Right now, that would be a PR. If you're at 2 pull-ups, have respect for 3 pull-ups. And it's like, have respect for that goal that's, right there that is within your reach. And it's not a big goal. It's not something that, is going to be maybe celebrated by others, but don't demean a goal that is, a 10% improvement or a 5% improvement, even a 1% improvement at some point. And I think a lot of this kind of taps into why gratitude actually works so effectively and why gratitude gives you more of what you're grateful for. If you think about it, is like when you make a bigger deal out of, a 2 pound weight loss, you actually realize that that actually is impressive. That actually is a big deal. If you go to the store and you like look at meat and you look at like, what 2 pounds of fat looks like, you'd have a lot more respect for you. You wouldn't, marginalize, the scale dropping 5 pounds. You wouldn't marginalize, dropping 10 pounds. Your end goal might be, it could be 50 pounds you want to drop. It could be 100 pounds, but that doesn't mean you can't, celebrate the smaller victories. And, um, getting excited about a small PR doesn't mean you're not going to reach that big goal in the end. If anything, it's going to make you more likely to reach that big goal. So it's like, set small goals and go after them like your life depends on it. Set a goal of dropping 2 pounds and attack that 2 pound goal like it's like the most important thing that's ever existed. And then once you hit that, set a new goal. And when you keep stacking these victories up like year over year, it's like you're gonna hit these crazy levels that you never even thought of. But the thing is, don't look at, me or JD's channel and, think about like, oh, I want to hit a planche. Focus on your journey and, reaching the next step. And then one day you're going to look up and you're going to be on top of the mountain and you're going to realize some of the movements we're doing actually aren't that big of a deal in the first place. But it's like that only happens though when you do like get dialed into your own journey and you start stacking up those small victories.
Yeah, I like well, like James, you say this a lot when we're talking in private chat. It's just like we give a lot too much respect to a lot of these movements, and when it comes down to it, if you're focused on that task at hand, like you said, they compound, and next thing you know, like you just blew past that movement, and it was like it might be a muscle up for you, Art. It might be something that you see other people doing. And you're like, damn, I want to do a muscle up. But by the time you're able to do muscle ups, and next thing you know, you're knocking out 5 clean muscle ups, and you're just like, man, a muscle up is just not even a big deal at all. Like I got bigger fish to fry now, and that's kind of just the way that the journey goes in general. But I think a good perspective to have on calisthenics or any other progression based aspect of life, most aspects of life are actually progression based, is to not look down on the people who are actually on a lower level than you as well once you actually do acquire a skill set or you do kind of reach your goals, because you have to think to yourself like, I was there once. I wasn't always able to do muscle ups. So at the end of the day, it's like, why would I look down on somebody who's not able to do a muscle up? Because that was me at 31 years old, or however, whatever, whenever I was able to do a muscle up for the first time. And the funny thing about it is a lot of times when I see beginners, they're usually a lot younger than I was when I first started doing calisthenics. I started doing calisthenics at 31, and the majority of people who watch the channels or who get into calisthenics now are like teenagers. So it's like by the time they're my age, it's like they're gonna be so far past where I'm at. It's not even gonna be funny. They're gonna be inventing new moves that people haven't even seen yet, and they're gonna be doing it at a way higher proficiency. So that's kind of that's actually an interesting point too, because I was kind of watching I was listening to a podcast. This wasn't even recent. This was probably like maybe a few years ago, and the guy was making a point about comparing generations to each other. And basically, it was like, for instance, you can talk about basketball. We can talk about basketball. Well, let's think about generations. If you guys are familiar with basketball, so nowadays you have LeBron James and you have Steph Curry. Previous generations, you might have had Kobe Bryant. Before then, you had Michael Jordan. Before then, you had Dr. J. Before then, you had Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. Now, if you actually look at the actual skills of these players, you know, Steph Curry, his ability to shoot, his ability to handle the ball is non-pareil. It's not even. it's not even comparable to somebody who was playing back in the 60s. Like they just like they were barely bouncing the ball. They didn't really know, they weren't coordinated or shooting set shots. They wouldn't even be able to play today. But you can't compare them from their skill set because the game has advanced so much that basically what you have to do is compare the actual athletic work ethic and the instinct that these people and the competitive drive that they had that was able to put them to the top of the field in their era. So you don't compare people as far as Michael Jordan to, somebody who Wilt Chamberlain, or you don't compare Wilt Chamberlain to LeBron James. You compare them to their contemporaries. You compare them to the people who are actually in their era. So, that's probably a whole sidetrack thing right there, but kind of got me thinking when it comes down to, you know, the future of calisthenics or just the future of the world in general. And that's kind of something I think about as well, is like it kind of goes back to the live stream that I had last week, is like talking about gender roles and how things need to go back to the way they used to be. It's like the world is evolving. So, if you want to be a dinosaur, a Neanderthal, then, yeah, you probably want to go back to, thousands of years ago. But if you want to live like a modern human, then, the human beings are evolving. We're, progressing in a lot of ways. And progression doesn't just go in a straight line up. It takes dips and it corrects itself and different things of that nature. But at the end of the day, like the world is changing, so we need to change with it. And like the old Bruce Lee quote, you got to be water. So whatever society is it, if it throws some challenges at you, you need to be fluid and be able to move around those and morph into something else. Put water in a cup, it becomes a cup.
Man, I think that's a good point too, because there's a lot of things that we have in our life, or maybe like we look back on with nostalgia. And I think too, we a lot of times think we want to go back to something in our life that's a closed chapter, and you can't go back to that. That doesn't exist anymore. There's certain places that you might have appreciated in your past that don't exist in the same state. There's certain people that you might want to go back to in the past that don't exist anymore in that same state, or there's certain pursuits that aren't there in the same state. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about life, is like you're constantly changing, but you're actually killing off old parts of you. And to basically become the person you're going to be, you have to kill off old parts of yourself. And those parts a lot of times aren't going to be coming back. And I think letting go of the past, and it's like, kind of, you talked about this a while back about traveling light. So you were talking about basically a lot of times people that hoard stuff in their house and like, have a lot of extra baggage that they don't want to throw away, are also mental hoarders. They're hoarding, old traumas in their brain that happened to them years ago that they need to let go, or just all kinds of useless information that, they got to let go. And, travel light, because when you travel light, it's like, you can move faster, you can change directions faster, you can learn things faster. But the thing is, if you're hoarding either mentally or physically, you're going to be stuck a lot of times. It's going to take you a lot longer to move. You're not going to be able to be mobile and be open to new experiences, because you basically set it up where you have such a heavy weight. It's almost like a train being on a track. It's like, to derail that and go the opposite direction is going to take way more effort than if you were like a little sports bike that can accelerate in one direction, then instantly turn around the other way and be going 170 the other direction.
Yeah, and I think another thing when it comes down to that as well is like, even on a physical end and a mental end, when you think about hoarding, like you don't have space for new things to put into your home, because you're just constantly collecting and collecting until your home gets so stuffed. It's like there's no space for new thought. There's no space for new ideas. There's no space for, new people. There's no space for, new energy. And that will be the mental aspect of it. So, being light, moving light, and kind of staying in that, minimalistic mindset when it comes down to ideologies and different things. Like these things just pass through our lives. We go through different seasons and different phases. And just like James says, like essentially when you're growing, you're literally killing off the old version of yourself. And to me, at least this is the way I look at it, is like if I was to choose to, like, say for instance, I learned some valuable lessons in my life and I choose to go back and basically, backslide into a person that I was previously, that's when, if you believe in something of karma, I don't really know how I feel about karma, but I think that once you know better, you have to do better. So, if you do know better and then you do something anyways, that's when you start building up that weight on your shoulders. Opposed to, sometimes we can make innocent mistakes. It's like we might have been raised in a certain environment and we thought certain things were okay. I think about it like, say, for instance, you were raised in the country in some poverty stricken area and like dog fighting is normal. For you, if you grew up around dog fighting your entire childhood, by the time you're 18 years old, it's just something that you don't even think is wrong. But, when you get older and you kind of get out into the world and you learn things and then you kind of see that, the majority of people look at dog fighting as kind of a heinous act. And if you're to see that and still want to pursue dogfighting, then there's something that you might need to question about your character. But when you're in it, doing it from an innocent standpoint, it's a less egregious. And Erwin Forbes, I'm a skinny guy, 6'2", 160 pounds. How would you build bulk up with calisthenics? And how do you acquire that workout for life mindset? I will focus on lifetime training and not just short term goals. I mean, I think that the workout for life mindset, the lifelong journey, is something that just comes along with the process. Um, I think it's good to try to instill it in your mind now that essentially it's a lifelong growth journey and that you're always going to keep on having new goals. And, the thing is like James said, eventually you're going to get to the top of the mountain. And once you get to the top of the mountain, where do you go from there? So for me, for instance, recently, a recent goal of mine was to hit 20 handstand push-ups unbroken. And I was working at it. It didn't really even take me as long as I anticipated it taking me. Probably took me a couple months to get up to that point from when I actually put it, maybe even less than that, when I actually put that goal in my head. And once I actually got to that goal, I was like, well, what do I do now? You know, and I ended up figuring out some new goals. I kind of shifted gears and wanted to get into some long distance running. And now one of my goals is actually, once I get back healthy, one of my goals is going to be to pursue marathon running. And I'm not necessarily in a rush to get to that goal of running a marathon, but I want to take the necessary steps to get to marathon running. It's another goal of mine. And there's a concept that I like to that I don't think I've ever heard anybody say but myself, which is we all have a fitness portfolio, and in that portfolio, we got plenty of different, we have plenty of different practices that we've practiced over the years. And as a matter of fact, Mind Blown has a question right here about different exercises that I was doing before I started calisthenics. So Mind Blown, before I started calisthenics, primarily I was into sports like basketball. I played basketball all the way up until college, and then I played a year in college, and then um, I did weight training, a lot of explosive training like jumps and sprints. I ran track in high school, so that was primarily like my mode of training. And on top of that, I actually used to do a bit of distance running back in the day as well. But calisthenics has definitely been my favorite form of training so far. And but I don't limit myself to that. Calisthenics is a part of my training package, my training system, whatever you want to call it, but it's just an aspect of it. And James, you want to? I don't know if you guys know, James actually has a pretty extensive background in athletics as well.
Yeah, I mean, before I started calisthenics, I was competing in Olympic weightlifting for a while, and then ended up injuring my back doing that. Um, but basically, I mean, I took so many lessons from that I ended up applying into calisthenics, and I think um, it was there weren't very basically the lessons I learned weren't very common in calisthenics, and I feel like those principles actually worked very well with calisthenics. And then For Irving, I'd say, the workout for life mindset is just something that ends up happening to you. I don't think it's something that it's like you start off and like, you're 20 years old and you're focused on, I want to be, doing X, Y, and Z when I'm 60. I think the workout for life mindset is made up of focusing on every workout every single day. And, it is, I don't think those are exclusive pursuits. Like short term goals are part of what working out for life is. That's what it's consisted of. And, I think, we have this term called blitzes. It's basically when we meet up, it's like basically a week of just going like balls to the wall. And, that's kind of like, if you're you might be pacing yourself. But then you might have these short spurts in your life where it's like you want to go give it everything you have for like a 2 week period. And it might not be a sustainable amount of training. Um, but, I mean, man, a whole lifetime of, fitness, there's so much you can pack into it. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many, like in terms of like endurance, skill set, calisthenics, weightlifting, could be powerlifting, it could be jumping, track. You know, Me and JD are big into calisthenics, but it's like one of those things. I don't think, I'm going to be, I'm not even limited to just training calisthenics right now. It's like there's, training itself is basically just the idea that our body can adapt to training different movements. It could be, training your mind to think a certain way or to perform different things. I think the reason why calisthenics I find so much enjoyment is because it's a mixture of strength, but then it's also the balance, flexibility, and coordination that it takes. And you have to combine all of those to basically make a whole package. Makes it extremely challenging and then I think more rewarding. And I think, to compare it to weightlifting, it's like, calisthenics bears fruits. It's like in terms of weightlifting, it's like you're measuring a number on a bar. But calisthenics is like, you unlock a new movement, like the 90-degree push up. And that's like, you planted an apple tree and it, bears some fruit. It's very, it's not really just a number on a bar or something that you just keep adding more to. It's, something, there's a creative element that I think is beautiful. And that's kind of why, I think we find so much value in it, but I don't think it is limited to just calisthenics. I think training itself is just its own pursuit. So,
Yeah, and another thing I would say about calisthenics in general, or I would just say about calisthenics, as far as me and James training calisthenics, is that we're not married to calisthenics. You know what I mean? So this isn't something that it's something that we're enjoying doing right now, but we might move on to different pursuits. We might move on to, you don't need to get emotionally attached to something that might just be a temporary season in your life because you might elevate past something. And that's kind of what I mean by that whole fitness portfolio is that, maybe 3 years from now, James is just like, man, calisthenics is too easy for me. I need a more difficult pursuit, And the thing about it is like, I would say one way to kind of solidify that lifelong, you know, fitness journey is to adopt a 7 days a week mindset. And, I say this all the time when it comes down to 7 days a week training is that it doesn't necessarily need to be, all out training every single day, 7 days a week. It's just doing something every single day, either that's getting up in the morning, doing some push ups, go run a mile, do some pull ups, adopt that 7 days a week mindset and it's ingrained habit in your daily life to the point where when you don't do it, then you're gonna kind of feel like something's missing. It's like, man, something is off today. I didn't get my workout in. I didn't get enough movement in. And believe me, guys, like I trained 7 days a week for as long as it's been a while. It's been a long time, and being injured and not being able to move as much as I'd like to right now is it's a challenge for me on a mental level, but it's also something that's challenging me to kind of work on other areas of my life as well, and take the 7 days a week mindset and apply it into different aspects of my life. And also, one other aspect I wanted to mention about that is that, when it comes down to, or, James was talking about how we need to take every workout and kind of just see the workout in front of us and handle that workout, and which is a great mentality to have. But a lot of times when we're kind of focused on that day by day, brick by brick mentality, we don't really zoom out and see the grand scheme of things in the bigger picture. But I think that sometimes life gives us these corrections, and right now I'm in one of those corrections, and it's actually had me zoom out, and now I have a whole new appreciation, a whole new gratitude for calisthenics and just training in general. And also, since I've been able to zoom out, I've been putting together a completely different list of goals for myself when it comes down to fitness, when it comes down to lifestyle, when it comes down to business, everything. So, sometimes we need that little break to kind of zoom out and like take a look at what's going on. And I'm getting my ring finger checked out since I sprained it a while bowling. So the only exercise I can do are pull ups and chin ups. Hey, knock out a bunch of pull ups and chin ups then. But guys, I think we're gonna probably end this live stream in a few minutes. If you guys have any last questions for us, let us know. Again, if you guys are interested in joining the mastermind, the growth mastermind, email me at travelstenics@yahoo.com. The link will be in the description box below. Make sure that you guys like the video. Also, if you guys would like to support the channel, join my Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/growth through calisthenics. Only $5 a month to support the channel. Most definitely would be appreciated. And yeah, if you guys got any questions before we go out, let us know. But at the end of the day, with this topic, why most people can't identify true value, James also made a good point the other day when we were talking, because, for the most part, there's always that concept, real recognize real, right? So I guess you could say high performance can recognize high performance as well. So a lot of times it's harder for people who are maybe novices or beginners in a certain area to recognize the true value of somebody who actually has a lot to offer. So I think that's kind of one of those things when it comes down to, it takes one to know one type of deal. And let's see here. Tracy says, "All right, man, y'all have a good one. I'm gonna hit you up after at your email for sure. I'll give you the information there, Tracy. And thank you guys for the knowledge. Thank you guys for the live and the knowledge. Which fitness books do you recommend, or books in general?" I mean, I got a lot of books I would recommend. I don't necessarily read fitness books, to be completely honest with you. It just depends on what type of book you're kind of interested in learning. I mean, you're interested in reading. If you're interested in some fiction, if you're interested in kind of like a motivational book, I would say just one book off the top of my head that I'm thinking of would be Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. I think that's a really good book. So, and it kind of talks about dealing with fear, and it also talks about drifting through life, kind of moving through life with no purpose. And he kind of gives, I would say, he gives a good like playbook on how to find some purpose in your life and different things and different habits that you can put together to kind of get yourself on track if you're off track. James, you got any books before we shut it out?
Yeah, I'd say one of the books I find a lot of value in, I guess this is more for a career aspect. It's called It's So Good They Can't Ignore You. And it's basically just talks about a lot of it dives into why skill is so important and finding meaning for the work that you do, and basically building up career capital by pretty much just sharpening up your tools and getting better at whatever craft you pursue. So
Definitely, yeah. I need to check that. I actually need to read that one myself. I haven't read that one. And Art says, as business owners, what's the best way uh, to be approached by people making outreach? I'm starting a business which involves a lot of outreach for sales. I mean, I would say I'm not 100% sure what you're asking. If you're asking what's the best way to approach us, or if that's what's the best way to approach people. But I would say, depending on what type of business it is, you might want to, I would say boots on the ground is always a good way to do it. If you can actually get into contact with people in person, we live in a digital society right now, so there's millions of people trying to reach out to people digitally. Even when it comes down to like YouTube, for instance. Like I have a calisthenics YouTube channel, and there's a ton of people who have calisthenics YouTube channels. Or I have a YouTube channel in general that's kind of more of a lifestyle channel, I would say, actually, than just a YouTube calisthenics channel. But there's plenty of people who are in competition with each other online. But when it comes down to the real world and making actual face to face connections, I think those are the most valuable ways to reach out to people. And that's kind of like an underrated way of reaching out to people nowadays, because it's kind of a lost art. Everybody seems to want to link up with people on LinkedIn or on social medias and different things of that nature. And this is the last question before we cut out. I mean, for example, how would you like to be approached via email or cold call? I do in person outreach, I do marketing for brands and individual social medias. I would probably say, because I get, to be honest with you, I get people who reach out to me every single day, literally every single day. And like, I don't really know how to put my finger on it, but like 90% of the emails I get, 90% of the DMs that I get are just like, they just sound super scammy. And it's like, it sounds like, oh yeah, well, hey, well, I want to help you out, but at the end of the day, like, it sounds like you're actually trying to get something from me. So, if you actually can actually be pretty authentic and just show that you're offering true value and be upfront, like, hey, look, this is a service that I provide, and I'm interested in it. I mean, I'm wondering if you're interested in my service, or if you need my service, opposed to like that kind of scammy, hey, look, I want to give you something for free, but rip you off on the back end type of deal. So that's kind of the way I would approach it. But
And
go ahead,
I
James.
was gonna say, for those kind of things, I think the fewer people you select, it might seem like, okay, I'm not reaching out to as many people, but a lot of times it's going to increase your success rate, because the more specific you can get about the actual person, like if you just like, reach out to, JD, and you're like, oh, I like that you have a fitness channel. It's like you already didn't even get specific enough that it's like calisthenics. Then maybe you can get even more specific on his calisthenics, and then maybe even more specific. And imagine you actually talked about, something he said in one of his live streams that caught your attention, and that resonated with you because of this X, Y, and Z. Well, then he knows that you didn't just send that to 1,500 people, because you wouldn't have the time to do that. So the more specific you are about why their business is the one that you're reaching out to, and the more personal you make it, I think the less scammy it looks. Like if it's something that can be copy and pasted, it's just going to go right in the junk folder instantly.
100%. And like, even when it comes down to just person to person things as well. Like I have a friend. She's a recruiter for a company, and actually we were just talking the other day, and she was telling me that about just job interviews in general. And she was just saying, hey, you know, she was talking to me about a job posting, and she was saying, like, when it comes down to when she's dealing with potential people that she's going to hire for the company, she's just like, she wants to know that they know a lot about the company. Like, they have to do some research about the company, because anybody can go on Indeed, or anybody can go on LinkedIn and just spam applications. It's like that doesn't take any work. And it's like there's so many people who are just basically sending out feelers, and they're not even really serious about something. And it's the same thing when it comes down to like spam emailing companies that you want to work with. It's like, if you're not actually taking the time to actually do the research and actually say, hey, look, this is something I really like about your company, and I actually saw this about something, I think that my service can actually be of assistance for you. So, you might want to really get into the details, just like James said. Like, less might be more in the long run. It might seem like you're actually doing less, but you actually might have a higher conversion rate. Like, say for instance, you reach out to 100 people and you only get one response, opposed to like you reach out to 5 people that you really did some thorough research on, and you have a 60% conversion rate. That's 300% more right there. You know what I mean? And that's a realistic number right there. And exactly, what do you know about our company? And yep, I don't have done a job interview. Okay, yeah. All right, guys. And Sukat, man, I keep on mispronouncing this dude's Sukasaru. So yeah, just watch the live on a playback, and appreciate everybody for coming through to the live today. And hope everybody's having a great day out there. Again, if you guys are interested in growth mastermind, email me travelcynics@yahoo.com. All right, peace, y'all.